Hi friends, Jai Hind and Jai Bharat. In this atmosphere of Corona lockdown, we should also understand what are the other things that are happening around the world. China has taken a leapfrog to be ahead of us in everything. Why is this happening? How is it happening? Has China succeeded in becoming a superpower? Has China checkmated the American supremacy? Has China succeeded in doing what they wanted to do? They wanted to be a hegemons in this world. Have they succeeded? Now, let's tell you how this happens. China had a very, very strong strategy and an ongoing strategy which was followed over a period of time without disruptions. They have planned everything. They wanted the superpower status, and it appears that they have got it. We will analyze how this China story began all about. 1948, after the World War II was over and China came to a different sort of a communist regime it became at that time. So thereafter their journey started. Fortunately, they were the permanent member of United Nations Security Council. But at that time, it was a bipolar world. The two superpowers, that is USSR and the America, they were at loggerheads with each other. And there were a whole lot of alliances as NATO, etc., which were not, China was not part of those at that particular time. So at that time, China had a huge population. So they decided as to how should their country evolve. So they made a very foolproof step-by-step program which they followed at each step. I'd like to tell you a few of the nuances in the past history. After 1948, Chinese were intelligent people, so they started going all over the world, and they made sure that wherever they went, they became technological, economic, and social partners of that country. And basically these countries were United States of America and the European countries which were there. So they had their fingerprints everywhere. So there they worked hard, learned things from them, and then they came back home. They brought those technologies, those expertise back to the home. And the huge population, the world's largest at that time they tried to use that as a human resource. Did not think that population was a liability. They thought it was a human resource. And they started working on it. And with this particular human resource and the borrowed technology, borrowed economical practices, they started a massive industrialization in the country. At the same time, they also started a massive militarization of the country. And the emphasis was on indigenization of everything. And once that started and they sort of picked up and they came to some level, thereafter, China stopped all its activities in the world stage, and they say that dragon went quiet. Okay, so dragon went quiet around 80s. And once they found that they have reached certain level of military prowess, they have reached certain level of economic prowess, then they started asserting themselves. The first and the foremost thing which China started doing is they started clearing their border disputes. They had border disputes with 14 countries in Asia. And today the situation stands that they have resolved their border dispute with almost all the countries barring one, that's India, and to their advantage. Now these were the land frontiers, and then they started concentrating on the sea places like South China Sea, Southeast China Sea, East China Sea. So what they did was they started using certain maxims, certain doctrines, certain laws, and which were at variance. Whatever law was used for the land frontiers, it was different, and for the sea faring, it was different. And China suddenly realized that there's a huge amount of fishery resources, there's a huge amount of oil resources in the East China Sea and South China Sea. So they wanted to capture all of them with the premises of economic exclusive zone fundamentals. So wherever they found those islands, they forcibly captured them. They had a lot of problems with the Philippines, they had problems with Cambodia, they had problems with Vietnam. So they all resolved forcibly into their favor. And in certain cases, they went to International Court of Justice or PCA also, That's the arbitration court, and those decisions were given against China, but China never followed them. So he made sure he coerced those countries like Philippines. You know that bananas case, all bananas were not lifted from Philippines, so they're major banana exporter countries, so they had to finally bow down in front of China. So Chinese made sure that all islands are in their command, and then they made a ring of islands in such a manner, they created artificial islands, basically to have their military bases over there. And then there's 200 nautical miles of EEZ, which they claim theirs, and they started firmly patrolling them. So that was the second thing. Then China started OBOR, One Belt, One Road initiative. In this, firstly, it started making a string of pearls in the Indian Ocean, which started from South China Sea, right till East Africa, that is Kenya. They had their bases built all over with coalition with all these countries by their economic prowess. Then they had a Silk Route revived. Today we have a train which starts from China and ends up in Europe, and the time taken is only 26 days, which otherwise takes about 3 months by the seafarings. Then they started CPEC. So all this kind of things, all these kind of measures, they tried to sort of increase their trading potential. They tried to threaten the world with their economic prowess, and they did in leaps and bounds. All this was done by China with a policy called creditor imperialism. They would go to a country, give them loans at easy terms, and make sure that they're done in such a manner that country is not able to repay those loans. Then they will try to annex that area, like it happened in Hamban Tota, like it will happen in Pakistani occupied Jammu and Kashmir for CPEC, like it will happen in Balochistan in Pakistan, like it happened, like they gave their own old fleet of diesel submarine to countries like Myanmar, country like Thailand, Maldives, and made sure that facilities created with their own men, with their own money, and they have their own some kind of sovereignty in those places over there, some kind of it, to freedom to move. So these kind of things they did with the economic prowess. Then they started something called Buddhist globalization. They tried funding Buddhist temples in many, many places wherever it is possible, like Southeast Asia, like Pakistan, or even in a country like some countries like in Africa. So that also they started funding those places with a lot of money so that they can sort of have their own influence over there. Like so much so that one of the types of biryani which is sold in Islamabad is called CPEC biryani. So such social integrations with the help of their religious tenets, they could influence those people and get them into their influence. Then also they're using their sharp power, and that sharp power is in various forms, by giving help to people, by giving monetary assistance, some humanitarian aids. So all this aiding to all this made sure that China started developing in a very, very high manner. And I've already spoken about that your economic terrorism and creditor imperialism, those things resulted in getting them a string of pearls around some kind of influence in South China Sea and Indian Ocean, because this is a supply route where 70% of the world trade route goes through this. So whoever controls this particular lines of communication, sea lines of communication, will be in a major advantageous position. Okay, now with this ever-increasing influence of China and the advent of Trump in America as president, things started changing. Trump brought in a new system of nationalism. I wouldn't say new. This was already explained in before Second World War by Germany as well as Italy, and we saw the devastation it caused. But Trump's nationalism was a little different. It openly advocated America for Americans only, and anything that you do will be for America's good. So, but China's rise was threatening Trump. So Trump, first thing what he did was that his predecessor Obama had started a policy of pivot to Asia. Trump gave it a new sort of a shift that they must interfere more in Asia to contain Chinese influence. So next thing he did was he started deploying all his aircraft carriers, nuclear-powered aircraft carriers in South China Sea. That was also threatening the supremacy of China, which by now, with all the build-up of those strings of islands, the man-made as well as natural, which had captured, and their EEZ of 200 nautical miles was getting threatened. So Trump became very, very vocal. It started a trade war. There were a lot of negotiations about the duties being imposed by the goods by each other countries, but nothing was coming through. But since the Trump was a little more vehement, and Chinese probably got threatened by Trump, and they also knew that the elections in America are due, so they wanted to think of some other strategy. Now the strategy is that this coronavirus was probably used as a biological warfare weapon by the Chinese. So the senior intelligence officer of the Chinese army on the issues of anonymity, he said something, and that report is doing rounds on the internet. So I'll just share that with you. He says that the Chinese were wanting to make a biological warfare weapon to be used against the general populace of Hong Kong. It was supposed to be mixed with the aerosol and sprinkled all over. The aim was to make sure that the mental faculties of all the citizens of Hong Kong come down, and they are not able to coordinate their resistance movement against China in that particular manner. But before this was done, so they thought that they'll test it over this. Now, all of you must be aware that China has a CCTV camera system where it picks up the movement of all its citizens who come out and take whatever actions they do, and then they have algorithms worked out. They can analyze the behavior of each individual. In fact, this is a sort of a hamla on its privacy, but then a lot of protests were there. But China promised people that we will not misuse this provision against anybody. But those algorithms and behavioral patterns are there with them. So with those patterns, they try to pick up some undesirable elements who are not required in the society, who are bad people, or who was anti-government. So they try to use it on those people. But unfortunately, the results on those people were so severe. Some became schizophrenic, some died, and things like that. The Chinese government took a decision that no, we will not use it against people of Hong Kong because we don't want that much of a devastation. But at the same time, Americans got a wind of it. They came to know that China has a biological weapon of this sort, and they asked them to share it with them. But China won't accept that they have it. But then CIA and other American intelligence agencies were smart. So they could crack one of the scientists working in that laboratory. And they could sort of bribe him and to make him agree that this particular biological weapon, this thing in a vial, is given to them for analysis. Now, when this was agreed, even Chinese intelligence agencies also came to know that this is happening. So they wanted to catch that chap red-handed. Now, as per the account given by this intelligence official from Chinese army, he says that this was to be exchanged in Wuhan in a market where there's a lot of slaughtering of poultry and animals is done. And since Chinese came to know and the Chinese officials wanted to catch him red-handed, so they were all there. And the moment that guy realized that he's going to be caught, he ran away from there. So in that hustle-bustle of running, he says probably that vial got left behind in the market and it broke down there. Thus, this particular virus spread through the animals to the humans. So that is how it spread. But if that be so, a theory, or Chinese deliberately wanted to send it to the rest of the world, there's evidence to that effect also. Like, I'll just tell you certain facts. Now, like China got the virus in Wuhan city, no casualties in Beijing, nothing happening in Shanghai, but things happening as far as America, as far as Japan, as far as Iran, as far as the entire European Union. Why Beijing and Shanghai? Beijing, which is the political seat of China. They have all its political leaders, all its army officials, they're all there. Nothing reported anything. Nobody reported anything. Whereas Shanghai, all its economic leaders, all the potential CEOs of companies, then all the presidents and chairmen of economic commercial hubs. Nothing happened to anybody. How can that be? And then you have Boris Johnson affected, the head of Prime Minister of UK. Then you have Home Minister of Australia infected. Then you have Vice President of Iran affected. You have wives of Justin Trudeau and Spanish Prime Minister affected. You have Hollywood celebrities affected. You have sports celebrities affected. You have Prince Charles affected. And how come nobody from China affected? And then we all saw the visuals of Xi Jinping going to an affected place, meeting people. He's just wearing a mask. When everybody else in the protective gear, covered from tip to toe, even eyes are covered with goggles. But Xi Jinping is without that. Probably they had a vaccine that which saves you from that particular virus, which probably is being used by the leaders, or leaders in industry, or leaders in politics, or leaders in army, or all those people who matter. So probably China has done this. China has done it to purpose. Now, what exactly has happened on ground? The entire economies of the world are tumbling from anything from 25 to 30%. But you see today, Chinese economy at the moment, as of today, is 3.4% up. How is that happening? The entire economy in the world is under lockdown. There are very, very minimal factories in functional mode. But in China, Wuhan is becoming to normal. People have started going to restaurants. People have started going to the factories. Chinese government has allowed Apple to start manufacturing, BMW to start manufacturing, Tesla to start manufacturing, but nothing is happening elsewhere in the world. How is it so? Entire world is on ventilator. The entire world economy is in ICU. They need masks, they need ventilators, they need protective gear. China is the only country which is manufacturing all these things at a very, very fast rate. And it is selling to the world, those who can afford it. And the weaker countries who cannot afford it, they are selling it as an aid, so that on a later date, they come under their thumb. Diplomatically, they become grateful to China. So that is also increasing the superpower status of China. And by selling it to the richer countries, it is earning money. Chinese economy is doing well. So how is that happening? That is just because of a controlled Wuhan proliferation, probably controlled one by China. And they have the vaccine, but they don't want to give it as yet. They want to see to a level, they must have decided a level, that the world economy goes into a recession to a certain level. And their economy comes to a higher level and much higher than the others. And then they'll be able to sort of assert their supremacy. They have already started testing missiles. The other day, they fired missiles over Taiwan. They flew certain offensive sorties near Taiwanese coast. Pakistan has already started testing. North Korea has already started testing. And they are their allies. So this is how they're trying to assert their supremacy. So we are not sure when will China reveal that it has the vaccine which can be given to control this endemic in the rest of the world. Probably they have a benchmark in their mind. They have some standards in their mind which they want that people should, they are closely monitoring the entire economies of the world, entire positions, and then they'll decide, okay, we will realize this and do something. Now just see, what was the role of WHO in this whole thing? World Health Organization praised China for their expertise in containing the virus in Wuhan. Instead of sort of admonishing them, they praised them. Instead of telling the world, warning the world about this virus, they were busy praising China. They had no sort of mechanism. There's no SOPs were given to the world. The world was not warned at all. So this is all because of China's money power, because China is the major contributor to the funds to World Health Organization. Now even G20 summit, there was no joint statement, though China, America were there. Though openly Trump and Xi Jinping said that we are talking to each other, but where is the joint statement? Where is the joint working plan for those 20 nations to fight corona as one unit, which was not there? And if you recall, our Prime Minister Modi had an oblique reference to World Health Organization also. It did not blame the WHO directly, but indirectly it said that World Health Organization and such bodies have been designed on the basis of our requirements of the last century, not of this century. Now the dynamics have changed. It said that WHO failed in doing its duty. So WHO has to be reorganized in a manner that it does the job for us. But then it became part of the bandwagon. The chairman is from Ethiopia. Probably they had certain soft corner and certain money power influence on it. So throughout this event, it remained along with China. And that is how the China is emerging as a superpower, the sole superpower, if I may say. We have no idea as yet as to how the American economy is going to go after this lockdown is lifted. We have no idea how the European Union people are going to come up. Though there is a bit of a disintegration and globalization. That is why Brexit happened. That is why America is trying to pull out from the Chinese stuff because of the nationalism, only for its own country. So like such all things probably would make sure that the China comes as a superpower, or it's somebody a power to reckon with, wherein host of junior countries, small countries, because of their one border, one road concept, or CPEC, or string of pearls, or other, as I said, economic terrorism, or Buddhist globalization, or imperialism with the help of their money, and places like getting Hambantota on long-term lease, or become colonizers. All these sort of measures would make sure ultimately that China emerges as a sole superpower in the world. So what should we do about it? So that is a million-dollar question which the people, the thinker all over the world are pondering on. Maybe after this calamity, maybe after this pandemic is over, then we will be able to think about it. So till then, thank you very much for listening. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.